Welcome to Job Tales, the show where I interview people from all over the world about their professions. Through my podcast, I wish to inspire you by giving an overview of the many job options for you out there. Today, we're exploring the world of Simone Aida Baur. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Switzerland's very first vegan interior designer and a founding member of International Vegan Interior Design Association. This is a pioneering niche field that combines style, sustainability, and compassion for the planet. Simone, welcome to the show. Please start by telling us what it means to be an interior designer first, and then we'll explore the vegan aspect of your profession.
Sure. First of all, hi, Laura, and thank you so much for having me on your show, on your podcast. So interior design is, it's obviously about creating interior spaces. It's all about creating a flow. It's about colors, materials, of course, the furniture, the lighting. So there's many elements that go into that. And an interior designer basically is obviously comes from a professional side of things rather than just a subjective side. Like, you know, if you do your own home, if you design your own home, you may just pick up things as you go along because you like them, and then sometimes they don't match together or something. But the interior designer obviously first studies the space and the people who live in the space, and their needs and their lifestyle. Do they have children? Do they have pets? What is it that makes them tick? What is it that makes them happy? Like in my case, I really get to know my clients very well. I ask a lot of questions before I start with a concept, which is then basically the first step that you would do. So you create a concept that is the layout of the space. If it's a renovation, obviously, it's a little bit different than if it's just furniture. And then based on that, you then select all the different elements that go into this space, which is, like I mentioned, furniture and materials and finishes and lighting and decor and artwork and wall paint and everything else.
Okay, so we're talking, of course, indoors, but also outdoors, right? Like the garden and all this, or is it just indoors?
It's just indoor. I mean, interior design, as the name already
As
says,
a
is
name.
about the interior.
If there's a
So
veranda or something.
yes, I usually personally, I mean, it depends a bit on the person. I don't do garden design at all because I think
Okay,
that is another skill.
another skill. Yeah.
Because you need to know about soil and, sunshine and sunlight and what grows where and how and why. That's not my specialty as much as I love plants and gardens. But it's the veranda, yes, that would be ideally part of it because or the patio or, the balcony or whatever, because you want to make it, you want to create a cohesive space so everything kind of flows into each other.
Okay. Does your work start with the design of a house? Let's say it's a new build, a new home. Do you work alongside with the construction or after it's been built?
It really depends. It depends when the client hires me. So a lot of times, actually, unfortunately, clients think, "Oh, interior design that comes last,"
Hmm.
and they would first work, with an architect and the construction company and so forth to get the house built. And then once they're ready for furniture, that's when they would come to an interior designer. But ideally, it is actually better to involve an interior designer from the get-go as early as possible, even in collaboration with architects,
Mm-hmm.
because architects work from the outside in and interior designers work from the inside out.
Oh, it's okay.
So there's obviously some overlap depending on the architectural studio, because some architects also do kitchens and bathroom design, some don't. But of course, like even if I design the room from the inside out, as an example, I need to, I look at the space and I look at the ideal layout. And based on that layout, I need my electrical outlets and sockets in certain places, versus
Hmm.
an architect may just place them in, in generic places where, it's just more average, where it makes sense to have it, but that may not be the place where you need them eventually, depending on the layout. And even with, simple things like curtains, people would not think about curtains during the construction phase. But if you have a certain style of curtains you want, then of course you need to have the type of windows that
That fit.
allow for this. So it's these kind of considerations that actually so that's why it's the sooner you get an interior designer involved, the better it is in
I
terms of
see.
to really create a space that you like. Also flooring, for example, because flooring is obviously a very big part of the house, and it has a huge impact on the overall style and feel of a space.
Is there a special link between, let's say, the energy concept of the house and the interior design? With like you were talking about floor, like underfloor heating, for example, or the way that a house is heated or is cooled. Do you come into that conversation as well?
Not so much in my case. Obviously, the less obtrusive items you have in the space, the better.
Well,
So, on the floor heating is nice because it's hidden. But, that's normally I don't come into the conversation when it comes to that unless people have, it's more with the architect that maybe they would discuss these elements.
okay. And then before you were saying, like if you're looking at a garden, then there have to be specialties such as you need to know about the soil, about the lighting and so forth. What are what's the knowledge that you need to have? What are the skills you need to have as an interior designer?
There's obviously you need to have a flair, and that's usually something you have intuitively, a flair to combine things, because it's sort of like an artwork in a sense where you have to combine colors, materials, and you create a mood, you create a feeling in a space, and it also needs to flow. It needs to be, it needs to make sense. It needs to function because people need to move around in that space, and storage, and where you place the furniture and so forth. And at the same time, I think it's also a lot of psychology involved, especially when you work in residential interior design like I do mostly. Then you deal with individuals, and each person, each family, each couple is different, and they have different life experiences. They have different goals and different aspirations and different preferences and different lifestyles. And in my personal experience, I've worked with a lot of expats. So obviously those are people that have lived in a number of countries. They're usually not from here in Switzerland, and they bring their own set of ideas and what they've been exposed to with them. And it's just to kind of bring that in and understand, okay, what is the client? Because sometimes it happens that the client they cannot really formulate what it is they want. They know what they want, kind of, but they can't really put it into words. And it's basically that's the job of the interior designer then, to kind of suss that out by asking the right questions. And also, like, I would pay attention to, to their clothing, to the space they are currently live in, to how they react to certain pictures. I like to say, if they react, if the eyes start to sparkle when they look at a certain picture or a color, then obviously that's a good thing. And if the facial expression is a bit like hesitant or whatever, then it's probably not such a good thing. So it's a lot of different elements, and then of course also knowledge about materials. All these different materials that are available. There's some technical knowledge is necessary, especially when you're talking about lighting and things like that. And when it's renovations like bathrooms, you have the sanitary aspect of things and functionality aspect of things. And so there's a lot of different things that come into it. And you obviously also need to negotiate with, suppliers, and deal with a lot of different types of people. Because when you work on a site, on a construction site, whether it's a new build or renovation, you're dealing with tilers, you're dealing with plumbers, you're dealing with electricians, with builders. So
Right.
and you need to liaise all these things together. So it's quite a lot of different things that you need to consider, as well as of course the softwares you use, drawing programs and things like that.
Is this something that you study at school, or is there like a designer school, or is it part of architecture studies? What was your specific path?
It depends. There are design schools, and there are, of course, there's also some people study architecture and then go into the direction of interior design. So there's different ways
Mm-hmm.
of approaching this. It also depends on which country, because not every country is the same. In
Okay.
Switzerland, it's not protected profession, meaning, even anyone can basically consider themselves an interior designer. However, I highly recommend getting some form of education because it's very helpful and it's really, I think it's necessary. My path wasn't very linear because I actually started out in the hotel industry. So my first career was I studied tourist management
Okay.
and then traveled all over the globe and worked in different hotels and different countries. I lived in 7 countries on 3 continents. And that sort of also inspired me to pursue interior design. I've always had a passion for it. It's always something I enjoyed. That was, I think, from childhood. I used to move around the furniture in my bedroom and, rearrange things. And my dad is an engineer and architect, or used to work as an engineer and architect. And I was born into a creative family, you can say. So that was always part of my upbringing. But when I was working in hotels, I became more and more inspired because, especially in early 2000, I was living in Dubai at the time, and there were so many new hotels being built, and I was just blown away by all the different styles and designs, and of course the Oriental design as well, which was quite new for me.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there was boutique hotels all over Europe where, really
It's true. It was starting, yeah,
starting out. And whenever I
inspiring.
traveled to Europe on business, I would stay at these hotels and I was just fascinated by all these different styles. And, I analyzed each chair and table and whatnot. I realized that this is something I really want to pursue as a profession. And I also became aware because of my own life of, living and working in so many different countries, that how important the home really is. Because when you, especially as an expat, when you live in a foreign place, your home is really your, sort of the place where you not just recharge your batteries, but that's where you sort of kind of ground yourself again before you go back out into the world, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's very important.
Yeah, and I realized just how important that is to have that space around you where you feel comfortable and where you feel okay, you can be yourself and you create memories with your family and friends when they visit or whatever, or new friends you make in this country. And I also was fascinated by how you can mix different styles. So, for instance, my European upbringing, how I can bring that into a place like in Dubai, but still add an Oriental touch to it and kind
Yeah.
of like merge the two. So that's something I became very passionate about, and then decided to study interior design at a design school in London, but by
Okay.
distance learning. Yeah, that's how I got into it. And then I sort of started doing my own projects. My first project was in the British Virgin Islands in the Caribbean.
Yeah. Nice.
Because after Dubai, I moved to London and I worked there still in a hotel and did some workshops at the school and so on, and really got more into the design, more into that world of design. But then moved to the Caribbean with my then partner.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that my then partner's colleague at work was building a house and needed help. And so that was basically my first project.
Ah, awesome.
And
That's how
it
you
was
started.
a huge experience, obviously, because it was an entire house with 4 bathrooms and a kitchen and everything. And we would have, because in the Caribbean, it's not that easy to find the materials you need.
Yeah,
So we
true.
would travel to the US, we would go to Miami, to Puerto Rico, and so on to source the different materials and items. And it was a really amazing experience. And I even ended up winning an award for the kitchen I designed in that project.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that was quite motivating. Yeah, so that was my path basically. And then before I became fully self-employed, I actually worked for a designer furniture company here in Switzerland for a couple of years, just to understand also a little bit more about the design industry and the furniture industry and so forth.
Okay. So the vegan aspect,
Yes.
how and when did it come about?
That came about because I myself became vegan. I
Okay.
always had a sweet spot for animals from when I was very, very young. I went vegetarian once before when I was in my teens, and then I kind of like gave up on it again. Vegan wasn't really wasn't something I was familiar with at the time. And then over the years, I just went back and forth between being a vegetarian on and off, and sort of, I guess you can call it flexitarian for quite some time. And I always had this sort of thing with, eating animals. It just never felt like the right thing to do to me. And then I became pescatarian and eventually vegetarian. And I was that for several years until it just literally happened almost in an instant that I had been thinking about vegan. And first I used to think it was a bit extreme, but then the more I learned about it and the more did some research about it, and then also due to some personal health issues, actually, I decided to take the plunge. Soon after that, I went into, more research and learning about veganism in general and the vegan diet, and, what I can eat. And I learned about nutrition. And that then in return led me to reading about, obviously, cosmetics and clothing and everything that, because it affects every aspect of your life. Eventually, obviously, also the home. And first, it was just for my own home. And I was looking around, I was like, oh my God, I have leather in my home. I have down, as in feathers, in my home. I have wool in my home. And it's just, the more I learned, the more that the beginning was quite overwhelming, to be honest, because I realized, oh my God, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and me as a layman, I would have never thought there would be so much stuff that is non-vegan and in a in a design, in interior design. But yeah, you just mentioned three that is like it's so evident.
Yeah, I mean, the ones I just mentioned are very evident, but then there's also the hidden ones. Like there is non-vegan byproducts or animal-derived byproducts in paint, for example, in furniture making, in the glue, as an example. It's basically everywhere, to be honest. And
Wow.
the
If
more I
it's in
learned,
glue, wow, yeah.
yeah, I just decided, I wanted to align basically my personal beliefs with my work, because the beauty of being self-employed, I guess, is that I can do that. And
Yeah.
I just decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to focus on vegan and sustainable materials, because I'm not just going to switch, say, from animal skins to plastic, as in,
Right.
leather,
That
as
is a
they
good
call it,
point.
plastic leather.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be beautiful, vegan, and sustainable. So that's basically the new approach I then decided to take.
Okay. Yeah, it becomes quite complex because if you get all the way to the glue, that means also some furniture you have to know, from all of the whole supply chain. Like, what kind of glue does this company use for that furniture or so bathroom appliances? I don't know. Does it get very complicated or is it feasible?
It is complex, and to be honest, it is impossible to do. I mean, and 100% vegan in this day and age is
Yeah.
impossible, because the supply chains are not as clearly labeled yet, especially in the furniture industry, as to where things come from, what it is exactly made of. But there's just certain elements. Obviously, the easy ones is leather and wool and silk and things like that. I mean, that's easy to
Yeah.
just remove
To
down
remove. Yeah, of
and
course.
replace with other materials. So the thing, it was more for me about finding alternative materials that are equally, that are good quality, that are sustainable, and that are still obviously look nice.
Yeah.
So that has been my focus, to be honest, to find these materials and source these suppliers that produce these materials. And at the same time, elements like paint, there is paint companies that actually do produce vegan and more sustainable paint, because generally paint is made of, it's basically oil, petrol based. So it's basically petrochemicals, it's plastic essentially, but there's also different methods of making paint that is then also better for your own health, because you don't breathe in these toxins. Just like with leather, for example, there is a lot of toxins that are used during the tanning process, because when you turn the animal skin into something that's supposed to be durable for many years, obviously you have to do something with it, otherwise it will just rot. So there's a lot of toxins, and they're highly toxic also harmful, not just for the environment, but also for humans and even
Yeah.
for the end consumer, because we breathe in these toxins on a daily basis when we're exposed to them and absorb them through our skin. So it's all these different elements. And then one of the most surprising ones was actually towels. And, people always like, what do you mean towels aren't vegan?
Yeah, don't tell me. I love towels.
So, it's basically just because the yarn that they use, which is usually cotton yarn, they use animal fats in order
Uh-huh.
to soften the yarn.
I see.
So there's a lot of things, but obviously, again, it's to make it 100% vegan is almost impossible. But there's a lot you can do to make it more vegan friendly and also more sustainable and also
Sustainable,
more
yeah.
healthy for,
Do you have an anecdote, like so something maybe that didn't go as you planned, or that you can share with us?
something that doesn't go as you plan. That's normal in this industry, to be honest. I have never had a project where everything goes according to plan. I think that's almost impossible because, as I mentioned in early on, there's so many different people involved and so many different materials and everything. But the specific one that comes to mind, that was in that first project actually in the Caribbean, which is quite an extreme project example, is that the wrong toilet was delivered, because in the Caribbean, much like in the United States, the waste pipe goes through the floor, versus in Europe it goes through the wall.
Okay.
It was a European style toilet that we
Oh,
that we ordered, but we specified that it had to be, the American version of it so they can mount it. But of course, somehow that got lost in translation and they sent the wrong toilet. So that set back the project because they had to be shipped from Europe to the Caribbean. So that set back the project by at least like a month.
okay.
So that was not very helpful. And I had a massive project again in the Caribbean, actually another one that I was working on, and then the pandemic hit. So you can just imagine
Hmm.
how challenging that was in terms of
What? Yeah.
shipping and everything. So yeah, but generally there's always something that it's just about learning how to troubleshoot and
You have to navigate, and then
take a
at
deep
the end
breath
of the
or
tunnel, there's
two.
a light.
Yes, exactly.
And now, is there something that you've learned that others could, the ones who are listening today, who are considering a career such as interior designer, even maybe vegan interior
Mhm.
designer, could be benefiting from? Like any lesson learned or experience you've made that you want to share?
I think it's important to know that it's a continuous learning journey. Like every project is different, and I learn something new with every single project
Yeah.
because every client is different. And I think it's also important to seek out, collaborations with other people and learn from each other. One thing I didn't do, and I think in hindsight, I think it would have been a good thing to do, is to first work for at least one or two interior design firms before going out on my own.
Okay.
It's not so much about the creative side of things, because the creative side of things, that's what all designers or aspiring interior designers, that's why they want to become interior designers.
Yeah.
It's that that fascination with this job. It's about creativity, and it's about selecting colors and materials and pretty furniture, and that is all true, and that's definitely an important part of the job, but that's not the job on a whole, because there's so many other elements to it, like the logistics, the sourcing, the negotiation, in terms of also with suppliers, but also with clients, pricing, accounting, even. And
Yeah.
if you do your own, if you have your own business, I do my own accounting, I do my own IT, which is the worst part of
Mm.
it.
Yeah, if you're a creative, I'm sure that you don't especially love accounting
Exactly. So it's
or
Excel sheets
computers.
and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things that go into it. So I think I would always advise somebody, who wants to pursue this career, to first work for at least one, if not two firms, and preferably one that focuses on residential interior design and maybe the other one on commercial interior design, because
Mm.
they're quite different.
Yeah, it's a good
And
advice.
to see where your passion is, because it's something that you need to find out for yourself. Yeah, and then just learn, and then I've been lucky as well to have very early on in my career. I ended up through the alumni club with this school in London.
Mm-hmm.
I met this interior designer who had just founded a group, and they would meet every 2 months, a group of interior designers, and talk about challenges because that we all face. And so every month or every 2 months we would meet in London, and that was a good excuse for me to fly to London every 2 months. We just meet, talk about, each person could put a question into the rooms, like, what would you do in this scenario, in this situation? Or can you recommend an accountant that works with interior designers? Or which programs do you use to do XYZ? Things like that. And then we also sometimes had guest speakers, say from like a rug company or a lighting company, that will kind of give us talks about these specific topics. And I found that extremely helpful, especially also not so much again about the creative side of things, but more about how to run an interior design business. Like, what are the aspects?
The organizational side.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
for sure.
Exactly.
It's very important. So, and on that note, as I see the time running, I want to end it. On a really positive note. Thank you very much, because it's opening the eyes on about your job and a specialty within your job, which is even more specific, and also the message that you need to learn about many more things than just being creative as an interior designer. And so I hope that the message has gone through and that some listeners will be inspired to look into this job. And I wish you all the best for your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.
And that was Simone Aida Baur, vegan interior designer. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget you can catch more on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. I'm always on the lookout for inspiring guests, so if you have any ideas, drop me a line at jobtalespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week for another episode of Job Tales.